Welcome back to another episode of the Empowerful Health Podcast. My name is Dr. Jeremy Kerrigan. I'm the host, and today we've got a really great guest, Karla Kay. Karla's an author, also does a lot of work in the emotional healing realm. So Karla, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
So I am an author, a book titled Grief, the Universal Emotion of Loss. I am a holistic grief coach, and a lot of times people ask me, well, what is that? Right. It's a little bit of life coaching, grief counseling, as well as some of the other modalities I use are yoga, mindfulness, breath work, and Reiki.
I love that. Yeah, because grief, I don't think there's a lot of help in the grief realm. You know, some people will do counseling, but
yes,
there's not a lot of other known resources out there for people.
Right. And as you know, grief is mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. So it really encompasses everything. And that's why I believe in kind of treating people holistically so that they can understand that maybe the tightness in their chest or the headaches or some of the other things that they might be experiencing physically can also be related to grief.
Absolutely. Yeah. When the brain is in a stressed state, it affects every system of the body.
Every system of the body.
It's really interesting. As a chiropractor, I see that as a common thing where people aren't healing as we would expect. You know, say they're young and active and healthy, but their body's not staying in alignment. It's not healing. Often there's some sort of emotional component to it that once they address that, working with people like yourself, their spine stays in place longer and they heal more thoroughly. Yeah,
it's so important to treat our mental and emotional health and well-being because that just affects so much in the body. And our cells remember, right?
Absolutely.
So our cells are listening and they remember the trauma or the incident that might have taken place 10 years ago.
10, 20, 30, whatever it happens to be. Yep.
Definitely.
There's a guy named Bruce Lipton. Are you familiar with Bruce Lipton?
I am familiar.
One of my favorite quotes by him, he said, a cell cannot be in growth and survival mode at the same time.
Right.
And if our cells are in that survival mode, they're not growing and thriving. And the organism, us, is the same. Yeah. If we're in survival mode, we're really not growing. And a lot of people get stuck in that when they're experiencing grief or have experienced grief or a loss. They get stuck in survival mode, not knowing how to move forward and to start growing again.
Right. And just continuing to kind of do or stay busy.
Right.
And in that survival mode, it's trying to do life.
Right. Just get things done, do the tasks versus really truly living life. Yeah.
And being, you know, we're spiritual beings, emotional beings, and we, you know, truly being with all of it.
Yeah. Instead of just existing or being present, being. Yeah, I love that. What are some ways that like people that experience? Let me rephrase that. People that experienced loss a while ago, what are some ways they know that it's still affecting them or holding them back? You know, what's the, criteria that you would say that people recognize, like, oh, maybe I need to work on this? Yeah,
you know, first of all, I believe that a lot of people, when they hear that I'm a holistic grief coach, they, oh, well, I don't have grief in my life. So, you know, I've never experienced a death.
Oh, sure.
We have to understand first that grief is from, you know, molestation. It could be from rape. It could be from some sort of violence. It could be from loss of a job, loss of a home, loss of a relationship.
Sure.
It can be several different things. So, you know, oftentimes people will come in because maybe they did lose a spouse. Yet underneath that, we might be working on something again from 10, 20, 30 years ago that is coming up that is also that they can understand kind of their learned behaviors. A lot of us have learned behaviors of shutting down.
Sure.
Shutting down and shutting off, that freeze. And we continue the cycle.
Absolutely. Well, and it's wherever we experience loss. I like the way you describe that. Like grief has to do with loss. We think of death, but it's It can be loss of what we expected our life to be.
Right.
We expected to get married and stay married, and now we're divorced. We expected our parents to be, supportive, and they don't. They may have, disowned, or we've lost in some way people that are still. I think that's even a harder grief, is when you're mourning the loss of someone that's still there but isn't there. But recognizing that, like, the first time we experience loss in life, we develop ways of dealing with it that may not be the healthiest for us.
Right.
They're survival techniques and not thriving techniques. And then when we experience subsequent loss, we're going to use those same resources naturally, and we may not be responding in the best way. So helping someone like you help us correct those, can be really key.
Yeah. Awareness, I always tell my clients, awareness is the first step.
Sure.
So once we have that awareness, it's putting other things into place.
So if people don't know they're still struggling with grief, what are ways it shows up? I would imagine feeling stuck, feeling frustrated, or some of those. What are some other ways that people feel grief but don't know they feel grief? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, they just, again, they don't have any hope.
Sure.
A lot of them don't feel very hopeless, and they're just struggling. They continue to struggle in several different areas of their life.
Sure.
And again, feeling stuck is one of them. I often, for me, as I went through my experience of a near-death experience, and as I moved through my journey, my spiritual grief process, I really found that so much of grief is really losing ourselves, right? And if we can find ways to just reconnect with ourselves, so much can open up for us. And if we can, I for one, when I was going through some things, I kind of just out of nowhere decided to stop, look within, listen, breathe, feel, and let it go. And so, I might have anxiety come in, and I'm able to find where it is in my body, stop, look within, feel, see where it's in my body, breathe, and let it go.
Right. Well, I feel like when you mentioned this earlier, we put our energy into other things, distractions and stuff. We get disconnected from ourselves. And part of it is because we define ourselves based off of external things. We define ourselves by the people in our lives, by the careers, by the homes. And instead of just we by ourselves are defined by that, right? We keep it external instead of internal. And so when an external thing is gone, we start losing who we thought we were.
Right.
And so being able to check in and who am I really, especially if loss happens at a really early age. I know it's really challenged because people don't have time to figure out who they are before the loss. Say, loss as a toddler or something. Then they're trying to figure out who do I want to be? Where do I want to exist in this world? So I love those thoughts you said about, feeling stuck, feeling like frustrated in multiple aspects of life. One of the things I was thinking about was people who, being yourself, you have certain things you enjoy. And if you're not finding joy in those certain things anymore, you're finding yourself doing less and less of them and being more and more distracted. We may be holding on to some grief that we didn't know about or could have been a long time ago.
Yeah, we can kind of stop taking care of ourselves, right? Absolutely. Reach for those ways to eat, to smoke, to drink, to anything to numb. It could be shopping, it could be going online, it could be several different things, but we tend to reach outside of ourselves. As a yoga teacher, I've always told people, come home. Home is inside of you. So let's just get back home.
I like that. Yeah, come back home.
Yeah.
Well, and even healthy things can be that. People go spending hours at the gym every day or obsessing over something like that. Can be distracting from something inside.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And, I've a couple of times when people have lost someone, I'll ask them how they're doing. Oh, I'm fine. And then I'll say, and how are you really doing? And then the tears come because it's like, it's someone else seeing you.
Absolutely. Well, and that second question makes you stop and think. Because people ask us all day long, the grocery cashier is saying, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. We just have this automatic and programmed response.
Yes.
But when you ask the second time, how are you really doing? Like it stops people and they have to actually face it. Yes. They have to see that. And you do get a much more real answer.
I actually talk about that in my book.
Nice.
About how different it would be if we actually shared with each other.
Oh, sure.
Today I'm heavy-hearted. I'm really missing my husband or my daughter that died, or just sharing and connecting with someone else, how we actually feel.
When I was a kid, my parents, my older brother died in an accident. I was like a toddler at the time, but my parents went for years to a group called Compassionate Friends.
Yes.
And it was great support. It was people that had experienced loss and grief. They were just talking and sharing that experience, sharing what they were feeling that week or that day, which actually, I want to ask you a question about this, is I think part of the reason we don't share is because people don't know what to say.
Oh, so true.
What do we say?
So true.
So your friend comes up and they're like, I am missing my, spouse that died 3 years ago. How do you respond to that in a way that helps them know that you hear them and know that you recognize what they're going through?
So a lot of different things. I tell people you got to kind of find your own. You could simply reflect by saying, I hear that you're really missing your husband today or what child. You can just look them in the eyes and say, thank you for sharing, or tell me more. And just slowing down is the biggest thing.
Being present with them.
Just slowing down. At my, the funeral for my husband and daughter who died, I can remember a couple hundred people being there. And so many people. I can remember I was in a wheelchair at the time, so I can remember just hugging people and hugging people and hugging people because people were coming up, wrapping their arms around me.
Sure.
And out of all of those couple hundred people who were there, I remember one person.
Really?
And it was a very dear friend of mine who came in front of me, simply put her hands in prayer, looked at me in the eye for a few seconds, bowed her head, and then left and walked off. And she is the one person I remember. I can also I can remember a time when I actually had started a nonprofit to help people with sudden loss afterwards. And I can remember being with a Spanish family, and I didn't speak Spanish. And there was a young daughter, a woman and her husband had lost a daughter in a car accident. And there was their other daughter who was translating for us. Yet there was just this, there wasn't even any words. There was me and her holding hands and looking into each other's eyes.
Sure.
And it was actually connecting, and no words needed to be said. Oftentimes when people come into my office, it's because maybe they have seen a lot of different counselors.
Sure.
And they're looking for someone who has actually lost a child or lost a spouse.
Someone who understands.
Yeah.
Well, people think too much about what do I say? I don't know what to say in this situation. It doesn't matter too much.
Yeah.
I mean, there are wrong things to say. We won't go into those, but we've all heard them. But like being present and being connected, and that where she got down on your level and looked in your eyes and was just there, and you knew she was there for you, has been memorable these years later, And that's the key, is being present. I liked one of the things you said, like, tell me more. Or if you didn't know the person, sometimes even saying, well, tell me a little bit about him. What was he like?
Yeah.
And being able to share someone that's important. It's really cool I was just sharing this with a patient today, actually, in the office. I said, one of my favorite things is to ask people about their family, because their face and their life changes, not their life, but the light changes, if you will, especially when they're close to their family or have these childhood experiences that were positive, they're going to just light up and tell you all about it, you know? And I'm sure you'd love to have any opportunities to talk about your husband and your daughter and to share their stories. It helps you still feel connected to them, and it lets that new person feel connected to you too. So asking and just, again, being present and just asking more and being there with them is a really key. So.
Right. You know, oftentimes when someone is not sure about what to say, it's because they're almost afraid that if that person opens up, what's that going to do with their own grief, right?
Oh, sure.
Oftentimes they're just a little bit scared of that.
We are. Most people walk around carrying stuff that they don't want to unpack, you know? And I actually chatted with a friend a few months ago, and she's like, I have way too much. I don't even want to go there, you know? And because she let a little bit out, you could see her not sure she could hold herself together anymore, you know? We have that strong desire to hold this strong persona together and be strong. And it's like, we don't have to be. We can break down at times.
Yeah.
And it's totally okay. And you're going to build yourself back together.
Right.
And with love and supports. And like, I think you hit on a really cool point. People find you because they want someone who understands what it's like, someone who's lost like that before. And the more vulnerable counselors, therapists, and healers are, the more they're going to connect with their potential clients, and people are going to feel comfortable there.
Yes. The heart is where self-discovery happens.
Right. As we discover ourselves and share that truly with other people, it's really cool that the connections made. I feel like some of my closest friends are friends that were born, if you will, in tough situations, people that we've bonded over hardships, that we both may have shared, or we've had similar experiences that just makes me connect with them more and feel like, oh, they really understand me more than someone else.
Yes. And I do believe the more authentic we are, the more. Someone had asked me the other days, I'm going on almost 20 years of my husband and daughter being gone. And someone asked me, well, you don't get over it. You don't get past it. And oftentimes I'll tell people, you know, it's not something to get over. First of all, I'm not going to wave a magic wand in 2 sessions and you're going to be better.
Right.
It is something that you get through, and you can get through to thriving, right? To thriving and to living. Yet if we're constantly shutting down, we're not going to be in that mode to be able to thrive.
Right.
So being authentic, I've shared my story lots of times. I've cried in front of many people. I can remember an experience within the first few months. I went shopping at Christmas time, and I just started shopping for my husband automatically.
Oh,
and I realized, what am I doing? And I'm in a department store and I'm shopping for my husband who's not, what am I doing? And I remember I just sat down and cried, and people walked around me and like, does she need help?
Sure.
You know,
someone help her, please. Sure.
And I was like, I'm perfect. This is, I'm exactly where I'm in the perfect place at the perfect time, which is for me, even as I experienced, you know, I was the driver in the car. So I was the driver where my husband, my daughter, and my oldest daughter who survived, her best friend also died.
Oh, sheesh.
So I was driving, 3 people died, the guilt and all of that. But I really do believe that I was in the perfect place at the perfect time.
You were right where you were supposed to be.
Right where I was supposed to be. And then, you know, I was right where I was supposed to be, connecting with other people and writing a book and becoming a yoga teacher and
the many people you're able to help.
And years later, I'm the perfect place at the perfect time with 3 beautiful grandchildren, being a Gigi and a girlfriend and dog mom.
Nice.
Yeah. So again, thriving. And when we can, but it all starts with the heart, right? You have to open that heart and
be a little vulnerable and share. Yeah.
Yeah. You will.
Well, in giving ourselves permission, I love that you sat there in the store and gave yourself permission to cry.
Yeah.
Instead of like hiding it or shoving it down or running out of the store, you just let it feel yourself feel that. The other thing I was going to say is like, no one would sign up for what you went through. No one would be like, oh yeah, please give me that. I love that though. You're almost grateful for it because it's
so grateful.
You can't change it. You can't go back and make it happen. We could be sad about it, and there is grief in it, or we can see where it takes us, and the things that it's helped you then help other people is profound. Having lost a brother at a young age, I've experienced a lot of different things from that.
Yeah,
emotional things, years of anxiety, depression, other effects of it. And I've got to a place in life where I'm actually really grateful for it because it makes me a better chiropractor.
Yeah.
I'm better able to understand my patients. It makes me a better friend to people that are struggling. And as I've opened up and been vulnerable, it's really cool what people will share back.
Right.
I shouldn't say careful, but I'm pretty picky about the times where I share my deeper experiences. Mm-hmm. And anytime I've felt inspired to share an experience I've had with depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts, it's really cool how the person on the other end will then start sharing. Right. And I've given them space to then be able to experience their own emotions, which doesn't happen a lot in this world. We're not really given space to experience those and to hear, grown, strong men sharing their breakdowns, their weaknesses, and their times where they thought about giving up in a way that they feel comfortable doing so, and then watching them go forward from there and starting to thrive more and not be in survival mode.
Right.
That makes me so grateful for the loss I've experienced, even though I wouldn't sign up for it again.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because we can't change the past. And that's such an important thing. We can change the future. And I really feel like my brother, your husband, your daughter wouldn't want us to spend our lives in grief and misery. They'd want us to be out there living life. And that's one of the important driver for me is I need to live my best life to honor them and what they've went through too. And so as we get out there and we do that, we're going to be able to connect with them more than holding on to the version of them that we lost.
Definitely. I was actually sharing with a client today that in having the near-death experience and crossing over with my husband and daughter, there was just nothing but light and love. And I really do believe that, they had placed their hands on my back and said, you can't stay here. You have more to do. You have to go back. I remember begging, please, I don't want to go back. Yet, I think I felt like all of these things I had to do, to do again, to go back. Yet it was really about coming back and getting back to that joy and to that thriving. And again, that honoring. And a lot of that, as you know, it couldn't have happened without the sadness and the depression and the loneliness and the self-sabotage or the self-punishment that I did or the overwhelm that I felt. For all of those things to happen, I could have harmony and hope and peace, and surrender to that type of life.
We need the hardships that makes us stronger and teaches those. And if life was easy, we really wouldn't appreciate it at all. And having those hardships and having to claw our way back or learn to walk again, learn to do all these things gives you strength that people who didn't have to don't have, and puts you in the right place to help and lift other people.
Absolutely.
I think it's so cool. And we'll wrap up here today, but we'll have to have you back on because I'm loving our discussions here. But it's the story we have and what we've been through is so unique and is given as a gift to help other people. There's so often I feel like I've been given experiences so I could then turn around and lift somebody else. And so I just wanted to say to anyone listening, if you have a story, you've been through struggle and challenge, other people need to hear that. It's so valuable as we share. We live in a society where we put on fake facades. We drive the nice, clean car, brand new. Everything looks great. The front lawn's manicured. The back lawn looks like garbage. There's so much of this need to give an appearance, and it's so detrimental to connecting as a community. And as we're vulnerable and open, we're really going to grow together as a community of people, whether that be our neighbors, our friends, or just even random people we meet on the street sometimes that I feel like God's putting in our way for us to impact. So.
Absolutely.
Any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to share? We'll go over the title of your book again, too, so if people want to learn more.
The title of the book is called Grief, the Universal Emotion of Loss. And I wrote it to kind of shift the paradigm on grief and loss. I think a lot of people think grief is linear. It's kind of steps and stages that we go through, and we're finally going to get to acceptance, and we're going to be good.
And we're done from there on out, right?
So I kind of explain that it's just clusters and layers. I have 7 clusters and 11 layers in the book. Yet, you can make up your own 7 and clusters and 11 layers, or come up with your own thing of, your own process. I actually had a client said, well, I've labeled my grief with numbers. And so when someone asks me how I'm doing, I tell them I'm a 4. Nice. And so one of the things that so many people have said that they love about the book is it's an easy read. It's, an hour and a half long. It's not that long of a book. Nice. Yet some people say, oh, I've actually had a couple of clients say, well, I just carry it at work. And whenever I'm having a bad day, I actually haven't read your book cover to cover. I just turn to a page and look down, get inspiration to go back to work.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it's not a book that you have to read cover to cover.
Sure.
Just simply turn the page and you'll get something from
Little
it.
Nuggets on every page to help. I love that. So if you're feeling stuck in grief from a long time ago, definitely check out Karla's book. But thanks again for being on here. This was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. This was my beautiful first experience, Dr. J, of being on a podcast. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for listening, and tune in for our next podcast.